The Scaffolding Comprehension Project. This video is just meant to briefly introduce the assignment and to also preview the resources available to support your completion of the assignment and to give you some tips for success. So first of all, here we have the assignment sheet, which is available on the course D2L site. And I'm just going to review some of the key aspects. First of all, the assignment sheet asks you to select one of the more complex verbal texts from your text set. So you want that to be a verbal text, so a print-based text. I mean, it can be a text that's available online, but it's dealing with alphabetic verbal print, rather than just a completely visual essay that doesn't have any visible verbal language. And then next it goes into what you need to include the different parts of the Scaffolding Comprehension Project. And basically there are these 5 parts. Really, if you're not a graduate student, there are just 4 parts to the Scaffolding Project. So first of all, you are to write an introduction to your project. And basically that includes a short description of the context of the reading, describing what subject and age level, etc. This is very similar to the introduction that you wrote for your text set. So you might need to revise it a little bit, but much of that text you can bring over this. As a reminder, this project is an extension of the text set, so there is a little bit of overlap. But that doesn't mean that your thinking can't change. So your thinking might change and become more sophisticated, so feel free to revise your introduction from your text set if you wish. And then the second component of this part is to explain how the reading fits into your larger instructional goals. And this is really important. So basically, what is your purpose for having students tackle this reading? Is it just because it's the next chapter in the textbook? But how does the reading actually, hopefully it's more than that, how does the reading actually connect to larger, big ideas and concepts in your curriculum that you're working with, or hypothetically will be working with? And then C, this component, is include a short description of the text, of the actual text that you'll be scaffolding or supporting, and including the citation information, a short summary, and the description of the text complexity. And this can come also from your text set. The next part is to then create a structured outline of the activities. Now, I provide some templates, some Word doc templates on the course D12 to help structure that. So it is more of a basic outline of activities, really looking at which activities you'll be doing before the reading, which you'll be doing during the reading, and which you'll be doing after the reading. And I'll preview some of those outlines in just a moment. But in choosing the minimum of 4 activities that you will do to bolster that reading, you want to choose 4 of these different types. You want to have a variety of different types. So notice for the Writing to Learn activity, I have here no use of the KWL chart or cluster map. That doesn't mean isn't meant to disparage these activities. They're actually very strong, powerful supporting tools. It's just that they are used very often. And so for this assignment, I want you to try something different, to look and expose yourself to different tools. So these are fantastic tools, and do use them in your teaching, but for your scaffolding project, I want you to branch out a little bit. We've covered at least 100 different activities, and especially very close to 100 different graphic organizers in this class. So do choose something different than the KWL chart or cluster map. Also, that goes for the vocabulary activity as well. Please do not choose a cluster map or a KWL chart to preview or activate prior knowledge related to vocabulary. So then after doing your outline, then you write a rationale. And so this is written in an outline form, but then your rationale is written in prose form. So this will be 3 to 5 paragraphs explaining why you selected each of the activities. And then in describing why you selected those activities, make sure to connect to at least 4 different course readings when explaining your decision. So that's 4 different readings. So then if you're a graduate student, you have this section, and we have discussed this together individually, so you know more about what you're doing with this. If for some reason you don't, feel free to email me and we'll make sure you do know that, but we have met individually for that. And then don't forget the bibliography or the works cited page. And that can be in APA format or MLA format, whichever you choose. I'd like to do just a quick review of some of the resources you have available to you. So here you have the assignment sheet, which I just went over. You have the evaluation checklist, so you can see which criteria are going to be addressed and looked at for your evaluation. Here are the different outline templates. So they're empty outlines that you can just fill in, so you don't have to get frustrated on creating all the formatting. As you can see, they're very simple. They're just asking you to list the activities that you would do before, during, or after the reading, and then giving a short description. That's one template, and there is another that's very similar, but just organized a little bit differently. And it's up to you to choose which of those is the one that you would want to use. Also available are some examples to look to. If you're a learner that very much is informed by models, there are some examples here. Here's an example outline, instructional outline, that might help give you an idea of how to organize yours. So the instructional outline, it's used one of the templates. This one was on Japanese makeup for Japanese theater, so it was made by a theater student, and it goes through the activities and then short descriptions of each activity. So you can look at this for an example. This was a very strong outline, so if you want to see an example of a strong outline, you can take a peek at this one. These are just short descriptions of each activity, because in the rationale section, part 3, it goes into more detail of why these activities and then connecting those to course readings. But for the outline, this is ample information about those. So a very strong example of an outline. And then, oopsie, let's see here. Going back to the other example, there's another example here that is also a good example to, sorry about that, is also a good example to look at. It's not as thorough as the other example, so I think the other example is stronger. However, I think this also works as an example for what your outline might look like. Again, notice it's not a 10-page lesson plan that has asking you to mention all the standards, all the different differentiation, etc. I'm really trying to isolate our focus on supporting a key reading and how you might do that, and then your scaffolding or your rationale component goes into more of the details for why you chose those. So those are some of the resources. There's also one example that I wanted to point out that I think you will find helpful. Is there is an example excerpt from the rationale section. So this is part 3 of the assignment. And here I've included just one page of a student's rationale, part 3 of their scaffolding project, in which they start talking about each of their scaffolding activities and explaining why they chose them, and then linking them actually to the reading. So I will come back and talk a little bit more about this in terms of what are some hints for success, but feel free to look at this. So when thinking about this rationale, I just really want to focus on how you need to connect to 4 different readings from the course. So that's 4 different authors that we've read during the course, and which should not be difficult because we've read a variety of different authors connecting to various different types of scaffolding support activities, etc. So in terms of tips for success, I have 3 tips for success. And the first is dealing with, when we go back to the assignment sheet. So of the 3 tips for success I have, the first is to make sure, and it's dealing with this part right here, part B of the introduction, make sure that you have a very clear purpose and that you state it very clearly, what your purpose is for having the students read the text. So rather than just selecting a text and then cobbling together a handful of random instructional activities, really, what is your purpose for having the students read the text, and how do each of those activities support that purpose? You of course don't have to explain how each of those activities supports that purpose here in this part. That would be more during the rationale, but here do make sure that you explain what is your purpose for having students read this text. Are you having students read this text which is about slave roles in the Revolutionary War, to get a more broad perspective than, say, the textbook is presenting, then if so, how are the different activities that you're doing, how are they also amplifying this understanding of multiple perspectives and different approaches to looking at that? How might then even the vocabulary that you choose to emphasize focus on that? How do your activities then also support that purpose? So that's one tip for success. The next tip is to not forget the works cited. I have a handful of students every semester that forget to add the works cited. So please include that. It's really important for me to see where you're connecting to other reading through the readings for this class, but sometimes people connect to other readings from other classes as well. So make sure to include all of those sources that are cited on your bibliography list. And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, is the rationale. So for the rationale, and we're going to go to an example and look at that in a moment, but I want you to really make sure when you're doing the rationale that you explain why you chose each activity. Why did you choose that activity? And then how does that activity connect to the specific readings? So this is where you give rationale for your activities, but this is also where you show me as the instructor how you've made sense of the readings and how you are applying those readings in the creation of this scaffolding project. So I put together I have an example excerpt that I have available on D2L that shows some of this direct explanation and connecting to readings, and I will go to that now. So in this rationale, the student begins right away explaining that I began my scaffolding project with 3 main pre-reading activities. The first was this, and just briefly gives a description of it and why the student included that. Doesn't necessarily connect it to a reading per se, because this person used multiple activities, much more than 4, but then goes into the second activity. The second activity is a hands-on activity that brings in an element of visualization by having an everyday item that is made of plastic at each table. The student describes the activity and then explains why they are having them do the activity. For example, right here. By having the students work in groups, they are pooling together their prior knowledge to come up with possible solutions to plastic pollution, which was a big component of that. Of the scaffolding project. This gets students' schemas activated about plastic while also letting me, the teacher, know what prior conceptions and misconceptions they might have about the topic. Activating students' already existing schemas is important because the more knowledge and skills that students bring to a text, the better they learn from and remember what they read. And then that is coming directly from one of the readings that we did. We didn't do this reading in our class, but we did it in the other section, so you can't necessarily use this one, but there are many readings that we've done this semester that talk about the importance of prior knowledge. It goes on to explaining a little bit more. This student could have also talked about visualization and connected it to some of our visualization readings. But then it goes into the next activity. Now the students have had their schema about plastics activated. I now present a culturally relevant text, the mini documentary entitled The Age of Plastic. And then it goes into talking about why they chose this activity or using this media text. In my opinion, this is the most crucial element for motivating and reading through providing an authentic purpose. Tatum describes this purpose as, and then goes into explaining, connecting the importance of providing an authentic purpose to the Tatum reading that we did this semester. So this is an example of rationale that clearly explains why you are choosing each activity and then linking that reason why to course readings. So that is a big hint for success in presenting your rationale for the scaffolding project. I hope this video helped dispel some of the confusion that there might have been related to the project. If you have any other further questions, feel free to email me with those or post them to the course D2L. Thank you, and I hope you find the assignment meaningful.